Quinn was unable to use it to block, and just now, it was how Ray was able to destroy the shadow portals. But these uses of the shadow, and that dark red shadow, is something I have never seen before. How is it possible? How long have you had the shadow for? Ray asked. Quinn saw a moment here, a moment that he could perhaps convince Ray. You are starting to realize that something doesn't feel right. Quinn said. I have technically had the shadow power for over 1,000 years. You were the one that told me the shadow power came from someone you knew. How would I know this unless you told me? You said you placed all your powers into the tablet to protect the humans from the threats in the future. I know you're a good person, Ray. You're just fighting for the wrong side. The wrong side? Ray said. The humans are the ones behind you, while you have teamed up with aliens. It's quite simple how you could know what happened in the past, but you do have a point about having the shadow for so long and you not knowing about it. It doesn't fit. But there's one thing I do know, if the shadow has come back, and it's stronger than ever, then I have to get rid of it once again. Ray tapped the chest piece of his armor. In between the lines of the carefully crafted scales, it all started to light up red with power. In doing so, Ray's appearance also started to change. Rather than the black scales that were on his face, and the gouty features he had, they started to turn a dark red, including the spikes that were on his back, and really a part of Ray's body in the first place, which was why they had the same energy, and now it was being used. How could he be so confident to even do such a thing? Bianca said. He's been fighting with a handicap this whole time. Is this just a game to him? If Quinn was easily able to overpower Ray, then this holding back would have been a bad move. These two were fighting at such a level, that one could finish the fight in one move, and then the other would have no chance to bring out their full power. Quinn had been fighting with his full power from the get-go. He was just utilizing all his different skills of the armor, shadow, and blood to try find the best way to combat Ray, who seemed to be dealing with everything using just his strength, and now he was even stronger. Using the power of the armor, a surge of power rushed out from him. It was a ripple that went out through the entire land. It didn't look to disrupt or destroy anything, but just passed through everything as far as the eye could see. There was a resonating sound like the silent roar of the dragon in the wind when the pulsing energy passed, and while it was passing through the land, it had managed to pass through two people in particular who had been knocked back far from their original position. Their bodies lay there on the floor, face down, and slowly the two of them started to get up, as they had feeling in their bodies again. Peter, are you okay? Chris asked, standing on his 2 feet first. Peter was still struggling to get up. The tingling sensation was felt through his body. That damned vampire demon, I'll kill. Peter was stumbling at the last word, and looked at the two in the distance. I don't think that's something we should get involved in, not unless we want to die. Churs commented, somewhat surprised that they weren't dead right now. The transformation of Ray had finished, but his armor was still glowing brightly. He no longer looked the same as before, his eyes were narrower, his facial structure changed, and his hair was now red on top of his head. He still had scales on his body, spikes on his back and a set of wings, but they no longer looked like that of a gouty. If one was to guess, he now looked more like a humanoid dragon hybrid. The energy, internally, I can feel that it has increased for him. Quinn thought. And the energy, it's spilling out of him as well. It was hard to see with the naked eye, but all around Ray now there were parts of his energy, his aura. It was dark yellow and small in size, but the reason why Quinn was able to see it so clearly was due to this energy completely getting rid of his shadow mist. Any part of the shadow that was inside him would have completely disappeared now, and any part of the shadow that was around him would no longer get near him or touch him. The shadow, will it even work now? Will the blood shadow even work on him now? Or will that just disappear as it touches the armor? Quinn thought. He wanted to know the answer, he wanted to try it out, but doing so would be a big risk, getting that close to Ray. For now, Quinn had stopped his soul weapon. The shadow mist that was spread out thin in the area completely disappeared. There was no point using it anymore if there was no effect. There would be better ways to utilize his shadow. Then, Quinn once again went with the same tactic. His clones all spread out into different directions and started to throw out blood strikes. Shadow portals were being opened everywhere, allowing for all the strikes to hit Ray. As the strikes got closer to Ray though, the power was so overwhelming from him and his armor that the blood swipes would begin to disappear. The shadow around it had completely disappeared, and finally only a regular blood strike had hit Ray's armor, doing next to nothing. Ray bent his knees slightly, his wings were brought in closer to give him a more aerodynamic form, and he looked carefully and locked eyes on one of the twins. Locked on. The ground beneath Ray's feet exploded and a fist was right next to one of the twins. It went right through one of the twins' head, exploding it into a cloud of smoke. It wasn't just one puff of smoke though. Ray went from one right onto the next twin and crashed his whole body through theirs, creating another cloud of smoke. He's gotten faster, a lot faster, and although I don't know about his strength yet, I'm sure he's gotten a lot stronger as well, but I don't want to find out. It was beginning to look like Quinn had no choice. He couldn't think, he couldn't act, as Ray destroyed clone after clone until there were no more. After defeating the last clone, Ray flapped his wings hovering in the air, and turned to Quinn. What are the chances that the real one is the last one? Ray smiled. You have done well, and your powers are strong. It's just a shame that you went up against me. I always would think of ways to combat the shadow, if it ever came back again. I might be the only person in the universe that can completely get rid of your shadow in a way like this. For putting up a good fight, I will end you properly. Ray lifted one hand into the air. From the tip of his fingers, the strong dark orange aura started to gather like flames around his goblet hand. He then pointed it towards Quinn, bending it back. The dark orange aura continued to gather around the gauntlet hand, to the point where the hand could no longer be seen and another image was forming. Of all things, it was forming the image of a sword. The Dragon Sword Fist. It might be overkill, but that is how much I respect you. Ray burst through the air, just like he had done with all the other clones. Quinn didn't even want to test if his armor would be able to withstand the attack. Even if it could, he feared he would still die anyway, so there was only one thing left to do. Shadow Space. Panic started to set in Quinn, because the skill Shadow Space wasn't working. Channel Red Novel Chapter 2292, An Awakened Soul. For a long time, the Shadow Space had been Quinn's safety net. It was a power that was unique even for the Shadow itself. He was able to store living things in there, go into the space himself, and those that were in the space reacted differently to the current time that passed outside. One of Quinn's big uses for it, that he had used in battle more than once, was to avoid large-scale attacks. At the last moment he could enter the shadow space, he would disappear from the enemy's sight and they would know no better as to where he was. In most cases, they wouldn't have a way to access the space either. When an enemy used a large-scale attack just like Ray had used now, it would make it redundant and the opponent would just waste their energy. There were a few problems with it though. For one, it took some time to enter into the shadow space. So in a lot of cases, if the opponent was fast enough, it was best to just avoid the attack, rather than risk getting hit before entering the space. Also, if Quinn wanted to deal damage, it was incredibly difficult to time it so he could enter and leave the space in that way. Regardless, Quinn saw the best opportunity to use it now, and for some reason, it wasn't working at all. None of my shadow abilities have been working well, ever since Ray started to use that armor. Even my blood shadow seems to have been affected. Quinn felt like he should have realized sooner that there was a possibility that his shadow space didn't work. What this also meant was his other escape-like skills such as Shadow Link wouldn't work in this situation either. The fist was coming toward him, everything seemed to be playing out in slow motion for Quinn. He could feel the power of the attack. The second wave started to gather the energy. Now it was coming towards him. Quinn's mind was going through all the options, all of the possibilities, and he was starting to think that this could be the end. This is it. This is how I end up dying, right here, to an all-and-mighty powerful relative. Quinn shouted at himself, clenching his fists. No, there is still a lot I can do. For a second, Quinn tapped the side of his mask. During the entirety of the fight, particles of blood energy were drowning from the area. For the entire battle, it continued to build up inside the mask. He had used the additional energy, and the converter here and there, but had stopped once he found out that it wasn't doing much against Ray. Still, in his blood attacks he did use the fire attribute to give it more of a devastating effect. Ray's fist was chucked right toward Quinn's chest and the pure energy of the sword was nearly as large as Quinn's entire body. The power exploded, covering the entire area, and continued to strike out far and wide. The powerful attack went through Quinn's body and continued on, to the point where from space, a large sword of a dark orange color had flashed for just a second before disappearing. Ray had his arm stretched out, his wings still flapping, but he was paused in that position, his stretched position. Something doesn't feel right. Ray thought, looking up. He could see, his hand was pressed against the armor. It was right in the center of where the phoenix pattern resided, yet there wasn't a scratch on the armor. Instead, the armor was lit up in a light blue in color. It was pulsating strongly. How, even if your armor is fine, how can you be completely intact from that attack? Ray said, baring his teeth towards Quinn. Indestructible shell has been used. The skill can no longer be used until the cooldown has reset. Current time 30 days. In the armor, there was one skill, a safety net that allowed Quinn to receive no damage, to essentially block out one attack, but he couldn't just use it whenever he wished. He needed to be extremely careful about when to use it, because of the cooldown. In turn though, Quinn, knowing the attack was going to be blocked, had readied all of his energy into his hands as much as possible. He threw them both forward and the dragon aura behind his strikes appeared as they went right towards Ray's head. Before they could reach, Ray raised both of his wings. The attack collided with the wings and now they were both pushing against each other. Unlike before, where Ray had fallen to the ground after the attack, the wings were doing just fine. If that attack didn't work, then I'm just going to have to beat you the old-fashioned way. Ray said, as he flew slightly above and punched Quinn on the top of his head. Quinn hurled toward the ground, crashing and bouncing off it. While Quinn was midair, Ray fell down and with his leg, he slammed it down, hitting Quinn with his heel, pushing Quinn further into the ground and creating a crater that was as large as the city they were in. Crap, crap. Quinn thought, as blood spilled out of his mouth. He no longer had the shadow, and Ray was far stronger than before. Without the effect of the blood shadow, it seemed impossible for him to win in a one-on-one fight. The only saving grace was that since he had stopped Ray's ultimate attack, Ray thought he might have a way to stop the attack again. But, he was getting a beat down instead, really better. Ray reached Quinn, who had yet to recover and picked him up by his foot. He then threw him across the land, until he had reached a large rocky mountain. Quinn's body crashed right through the mountain, creating a large hole. Through that hole, Ray wasn't too far behind trying to strike again. With his hands, Quinn created two large blood swords, and held them towards Ray. Not slowing down, Ray spun, and with his fists, he punched, breaking the blood sword, and then punched the other in succession, destroying the swords completely. Picking up speed, Ray then grabbed Quinn right by the neck, and was holding on tight. You have this strong armor, you have the power of the shadow, but what do you have yourself? What of your own powers do you have that you can use? Ray asked. Quinn was already putting everything he had into every attack, using all of his chi and blood power, so what else could he do? The demon form. Quinn thought. The demon form, Quinn still had no idea what it really did. It wasn't something he could control either, so there was no guarantee that he could be saved by it, but if he was going to die anyway. No, Quinn. The voice said in his head again. You don't need to do that. You still have one more thing you can try. It's ready. The voice, now Quinn was sure of it, it was Alex, and unlike before, Alex was directly talking to him. Why was Quinn unable to hear Alex before? The answer was something that Quinn was unaware of, and unaware of what was happening. The power from the mask, part of it was going into the gauntlets. All of the blood energy that was being used was also going to the gauntlets, because it was yet to be fully awakened. Alex had a brief moment where he was able to talk to Quinn, but he had yet to reach his full self. Now that the blood from the mask had gathered enough power and shared enough with it to awaken Alex, it meant one more thing. A new skill has been unlocked, Azura's Blood Form. Channel Red Novel Chapter 2293, Getting Rid of Everything. Stark's body had been stored in Minnie's shadow space. They wished to give him a proper burial and at least take back his body to his home planet where it belonged. On top of that, there was also the armor that Quinn had loaned Stark. It was still on his body. Everyone was getting ready to leave the monitoring room, but before that there were a couple of things Logan needed to do. Kneeling by Jack's body, several pieces of equipment attached to Logan were scanning him all over. What was surprising was how Logan had picked up Jack's hand. His finger transformed into a sharp tool-like knife and sliced Jack's finger right off. "What are you doing?" Layla asked. "I'm making a scan of Jack, so we can bypass all of his systems. He had a lock on that system that I was unable to override. One would need a face scan or his finger. I can analyze his face enough to input it as a type of password into the system, but I could never get Jack to stay still long enough. Now, he has no choice really." Layla wanted to ask if he could do all that with just scanning the device, then why did he need to chop off his finger like so, but she thought it was best just to avoid this subject for now. Otherwise, she would have to hear some of Logan's crude jokes. Done. Standing up, Logan went to the large bundle of monitors, and placed both of his hands on the console underneath. "What are you doing now, Uncle Logan?" Minnie asked, her finger on her lips. "As I said before, I'm disabling part of the large machine that Sil needs to use." Logan explained. "But there's a lot more than that needs to be done." The Marco Cruise was a business that was set up by Jack and Jim. They started it on another planet, and they have more ships than just these two. We need to make sure that no one can take over their gold. We need to find every single facility they have that helps them create the Valkyrie. We need to look into any facilities they have at all, and any secrets that Jim was hiding as well. The others hadn't thought about that, what would happen beyond the war. There were always times where one would try and seek revenge, or try to finish accomplishing what another was unable to do. They were happy that they had Logan on their side. There's only so much information I can get on my side, and I'm sure, knowing what type of person Jim is, he would have restricted access to multiple things that Jack didn't have access to. Which is why I'm sending everything I know to someone on the other side, on the other Marco cruise ship. Layla raised an eyebrow wondering who it could be. The person on the other side was quite trusted by Jim. He was sure he had him so under control and on his side that he took him nearly everywhere with him, and that person was Vincent. In his lab, Vincent was receiving all of the information he needed from Logan, but there was a
in every way, I can't give it up. Anything just to feel the rush. This just ain't enough.